What is going on, Jet fans? I am Matt O'Leary back with another video. I am so excited for this one as it will be a full 2023 preview, including stat predictions for offense, defense, record predictions. Where do the Jets finish in the division? Where do they finish their season? All that. I am so excited to hop into this video. Before the start of the season, make sure to pick up your Always Loyal shirt. That's my favorite thing about Jet fans is how loyal Jet fans are. I have it linked down below in the description of the video. I teamed up with Jet Up for this one, for this collab. I am so excited about it. I want you to pick up your shirt. But let's hop into the episode. We're going to start with, first I'm going to go stat predictions. We'll go pretty much position by position. We'll go quarterbacks, receiving yards, rushing yards, defensive line, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties. Then we'll do record predictions and just a whole bunch of fun stuff in this one. Let's start with the quarterback because that is the most interesting. And also, by the way, like, these numbers have to line up. So, like, it's not going to be like, oh, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to throw for 4,500 yards and, like, all these players have over 1,000 yards, and then if you tally it up, it's like, well, Matt, you had him throwing for 6,000. Actually, no, I had to go through and make sure that everything lined up, from completions to attempts to yardage, the whole nine. So, touchdown, receptions, and passes, the whole thing. It was a lot of fun to do, a lot of work to do, but I am excited to finally share it. So, all right, here is my Aaron Rodgers prediction for the 2023 season. I have him at 565 attempts, 375 completions, which is a 66.4 completion percentage, 4,404 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 34 touchdown passes, which would be a franchise record, 8 interceptions, which is 259.1 yards per game, and that translates to a 102.9 passer rating. That kind of season for a Jets quarterback would be something we have not seen. Those rankings for where that would fit for how guys produced last year. So if you're interested in some context of like how would that look around the league, 565 attempts would rank 10th, completion percentage 12th, yards 7th, yards per attempt is 5th. Touchdowns would be 4th, and yards per game would be 9th. So that is pretty close to it for pretty much a top 10 quarterback season, which is where I think he ends up. I think he plays like a top 10 quarterback this year. I don't know if he is in that top 3 category. I think it'd be very hard for him to put up that kind of production with how much the Jets are going to run the football and the other things that they'll like to do. But I think every Jet fan would sign up for this kind of season. As I said, 4,400 yards would be a record. 34 touchdowns would be a Jets record. I would be thrilled if you're getting this kind of production from Aaron Rodgers, and I think this is what you're getting. I do think you're getting a very, very good quarterback season, which that's elite numbers. As I said, if he puts up that kind of stat production, that would put him as a top 10 quarterback, closer to top 5 quarterback. All right, we just did passing yards. Now we're going to go to receiving. So this is going to include wide receivers, tight ends, and even the running backs who are involved in the passing attack. Keep in mind, these numbers have to add up. So I'm working with 4,404 passing yards and 34 touchdowns and a completion percentage of 66.4%. So I have Garrett Wilson leading the way. Shocker, with 102 catches, 1,379 yards, and 10 touchdowns. I am so excited to watch Garrett Wilson this year. I think he is going to put up just absolutely stellar numbers and become one of the elite wide receivers in football. That would be a monster second year. Jets receivers don't put up that kind of production. You have to go back to Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker in 2015. It's rare to see someone that dominant. I have Allen Lazard next up with 61 receptions, 760 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I think he is kind of the de facto number 2 receiver. This is not factoring in any sort of trades. I just think this is just, how the roster is right now and looking at it going forward, what they're going to produce. 760 yards, 6 touchdowns, 44.7 yards per game. That's pretty on par for what he's done so far in his NFL career. This is where I would have had Corey Davis. I swapped out Xavier Gibson in that spot. I had him finishing with just 6 catches for 47 yards. I don't think he's going to be utilized a lot as a receiver. I think he will be utilized significantly more as a punt and kick returner. Tyler Conklin, I had at 49 receptions for 514 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think he'll give you similar yardage to what he did last year, but the touchdown numbers will go up because, well, let's face it, Aaron Rodgers likes to utilize the tight end, especially in the red zone. Same with Nathaniel Hackett. I think both of those guys are going to want to feature the tight end more. And I think Conklin's the number one tight end on this team. Randall Cobb and Mecole Hardman are two guys who I think finish with similar production, but we'll go Hardman first. 28 catches, 379 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He'll kind of be a little bit more of that gadget guy. And Randall Cobb, sneaky, going to give you some decent production. 32 catches, 406 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. That is Aaron Rodgers' buddy. He's not going anywhere. He's going to have a bigger role on this team than I think some people think. And he's fine as a 4th or 5th receiver. Ideally a 5th receiver, but for now he's probably closer to their 3rd receiver if we're being honest with ourselves, but it is what it is. Jeremy Ruckert, I think, has a little bit more production, 16 receptions for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think him and Uzama kind of combine for what would be a tight end 2 production. So I have Uzama at 12 catches, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown. So if you combine those two, you're looking at 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. That sounds like tight end 2 kind of production. But they're kind of splitting it with Ruckert taking the little bit of the edge, I think, in the tight end 2 role. Both guys will be utilized as blockers and in the run game too. So the stat lines might not necessarily be there, but they'll be useful pieces. Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Dalvin Cook. So we'll do the 3 running backs together. I think Breece is the most active, 36 receptions, 347 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. I have Michael Carter with 12 catches for 101 yards, and Dalvin Cook, 21 catches, 207 yards, and 1 touchdown. So there you go. That's 4,004 yards and 34 passing touchdowns or receiving touchdowns for this group. But again, I think Garrett Wilson leads the way by a significant margin. Allen Lazard ends up being number 2 in receiving, and Tyler Conklin ends up being the 3rd guy in the pecking order with a bunch of touchdowns. Well, 7's a bunch. So 2nd in receiving touchdowns on the team. All right, let's take a look at rushing for the New York Jets now. I have Breece Hall with 212 rushing attempts, just over 1,000 yards, 1,018, 4.8 yards per attempt, and 7 rushing touchdowns. This one was really hard to predict because I have no idea how quickly they're going to bring him on, or if he's going to, split time with Dalvin Cook, with the bringing in someone as a RB2 of that caliber. I think is going to, make a pretty big difference, but I think they're going to use they're going to end up relying on Breece down the stretch, get him over 200 attempts, just over 1,000 yards. And if you're combining his numbers with the receiving yards, then he's putting up close to 1,400 yards, all-purpose yards, and close to 10 touchdowns. I think he's going to be an incredible player this year. I'm really excited for Breece Hall. Dalvin Cook, I have at 125 rushing attempts, 513 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt, 30.1 yards per game, 4 touchdowns. I think he's utilized more so at the start of the year and then fades a little bit as Breece Hall begins to get more of the workload, and then they work some of the younger guys in as well. Michael Carter, I have 71 attempts, 305 yards, 4.3 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. Izzy Abanikanda, 30 attempts, 129 yards, 4.3 yards per attempt, and a touchdown. Aaron Rodgers, why not? We got to mention Aaron Rodgers running the ball. I have him at 31 attempts, 118 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Mecole Hardman will have 9 carries, 68 yards, no touchdowns. And Nick Bawden, 4 carries for Nick Bawden, the fullback, baby, 8 yards, 2 yards per attempt. He gets the ball a couple of times. No receptions. I did not have him on the reception list, but in total, I have the Jets at 2,158 rushing yards, which would have ranked them 12th last year, 4.5 yards per attempt, which would have put them at 15th in the NFL, which is 126.9 yards per game, and 16 rushing touchdowns, which would put them 11th. So just outside the top 10 in a lot of these rushing categories, but average. So with this kind of production, I would think the Jets would have pretty close to a top 10 offense. That's in total yardage. You're looking at like 6,388 yards and 48 total touchdowns. That to me is absolutely a top 10 offense, which is rare. It's very rare that the Jets find themselves with that kind of offensive production, but I think it's something that would excite Jet fans a lot. All right, to the defensive side of the ball, let's take a look at it. All right, Quinnen Williams, I have finishing with 10.5 sacks, 54 pressures, playing 66% of snaps, 61 tackles, 11 tackles for a loss, and 2 forced fumbles. He's absolutely stellar. Second year in a row that he's going to end up going over double-digit sacks, double-digit tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles. He's incredible. I love me some Quinnen Williams. John Franklin Myers, 6 sacks, 47 pressures, 51% of the snaps, 41 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, and 1 forced fumble. Just steady Eddie. He does a lot for this team. Really, really like me some JFM. Jermaine Johnson, I have at 6 sacks, 39 pressures, 48% of the snaps, so just under 50%. 35 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss. I just think he's going to have a really nice, solid step up in year 2. Carl Lawson, 6.5 sacks, 41 pressures, 52% of the snaps, 38 tackles, 6 for a loss, and 2 forced fumbles. Will McDonald as a rookie, 3.5 sacks. I think he it plays a limited role. I have him at 38% of the snaps, which is just about where Jermaine was last year. 3 tackles for a loss and 2 forced fumbles. I know that's a lot for someone who doesn't play a ton, but he's going to get a couple strip sacks, I think, this year. Bryce Huff, I have at 4 sacks with 32 pressures, 30% of the snaps. He just doesn't get on the field enough. Maybe that changes this year, but he's playing like 30% of the snaps and giving you 4 sacks and 32 pressures. I think you sign up for. Michael Clemens, I have 2 sacks, 12 pressures, 30% of snaps, 20 tackles, 2 for a loss. Solomon Thomas, half a sack, 10 pressures. Al Woods, 2 sacks, 10 pressures. And Quentin Jefferson will round this out. I think he finds his way into 4 sacks, 19 pressures, 47% of snaps. So just from defensive linemen alone, that's 45 sacks and 285 pressures. That is incredible. They are going to be a really, really fun unit to watch, led by Quinnen Williams. He got paid, and deservedly so. He is going to be stellar for that team. Next up in sacks after that, I have Carl Lawson at 6.5. JJ and JFM at 6. I don't think they're going to have 2 double-digit guys, but they're going to have a boatload of people in like that, 4 to 6.5 sack range. And just, again, Quinnen's going to be the one who really, really gets after him. With the speed on the edge, the quarterbacks are going to have to step up in the pocket and step up pretty much right into Quinnen Williams' arms. It's going to work perfect for him. All right, let's take a look at the linebackers led by CJ Mosley. I have him with 152 tackles, 7 for a loss, a forced fumble, 12 missed tackles, and 2 sacks. The leader on this defense, yes, Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner, they're the young stars, but CJ Mosley, the veteran on the middle of the field, is a fun one and a really good player. Quincy Williams, I have with 2 sacks, 16 missed tackles, 87 total tackles, 9 for a loss, and a forced fumble. He is someone that they really like a lot. They signed him to a new contract extension, and he is going to be the number 2 linebacker on this team. Jamian Sherwood takes over as the Quan Alexander role. I have him at 51 tackles, 4 for a loss. And Zaire Barnes, I think, gets some playing time as well. I have him at 18 tackles and 1 for a loss. But again, the leader of the clubhouse is going to be CJ Mosley. He's going to rack up a bunch of tackles. Quincy Williams is someone who's been, again, really steady. I think he's going to give you somewhere around 90 tackles. I had him at 87. Missed tackles could be a little bit of an issue for the Jets linebackers, so I have them a little bit on the higher side at 12 for Mosley, 16 for Quincy Williams. But those are, again, 2 really solid guys. You feel pretty comfortable with those 2. Let's take a look at Jets corners now. Okay, so Sauce Gardner, how does he follow up in his sophomore season? I think the interceptions go up. I have him at 5 picks, 72 tackles, 418 yards allowed, and 2 touchdowns, allowing a 52 completion percentage. That would be stellar. He let up 1 touchdown last year as a rookie. Teams are going to be forced to throw on the Jets a little bit more, so I think his production, I guess, gets worse with allowing more yards, but 418 yards is still really good, and 2 touchdowns allowed is still really good, and 52% completion percentage is still really good. And the interceptions go up a little bit. He goes from 2 to 5. Stellar player, one of the best corners in football, if not the best corner in football. I think he shows it again in year 2. DJ Reed, I have him finishing with 3 interceptions, 81 tackles, 510 yards allowed, 3 touchdowns, and a 58.2 completion percentage allowed. A stellar number 2, one of the best number 2 corners, if not the best number 2 corner in football, would be a number 1 on most teams. Michael Carter II out of the slot, 2 picks, 69 tackles, 581 yards allowed, and 1 touchdown, a 71.3 completion percentage. It's a lot harder to do that kind of work in the slot. He's a very, very good slot corner, though, so love having him around. And Brandon Eccles, I'll have him at 9 tackles on the year, allowing 38 yards. He'll come in sparingly for this Jets defense, and that's really the only other corner to worry about. But the starting trio of Gardner, Reed, and Carter are the best starting trio in the NFL, and I am just so incredibly excited to watch that group get after it again. Let's close out the stat prediction portion of this video with the safety room. Jordan Whitehead, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 92 tackles, 318 yards allowed, and 3 receiving touchdowns, 65.1 completion percentage allowed. Tony Adams will be a heavy factor at free safety. Excited for him. 3 interceptions, 57 tackles, 287 yards allowed, and 3 receiving touchdowns allowed. Adrian Amos, 1 sack, 1 interception, 38 tackles, 115 yards allowed, and a 64.2 completion percentage. It's going to be really interesting to see how Tony Adams impacts this Jets defense. They did not have a good free safety at all in LaMarcus Joyner. You would think that with Tony Adams, that would help improve things for this New York Jets team, and just, overall have a little bit more consistency at the position. But young player. I mean, he was a UDFA last year, didn't get a ton of playing time, and is now going to be a starter. Kind of hard to project how he's going to do for this Jets football team, but I'm very excited to watch him this season. Okay, so we did offensive stats, we did defensive stats. Now it's time to get in the bread and butter portion of this one, where we're going to go record prediction, some stat lines. I'll tell you where they finish in the AFC East. I'll give you the full AFC East division standings. I'll give you the full AFC playoff standings. I'll tell you where the Jets finish in the playoffs and make my predictions there. Okay, so the New York Jets, I have going 11-6 this season, which would be a stellar season. The last time they had 11 wins, you would have to go back to the 2010 season, which for most younger Jet fans, that is the best season that they've ever seen. 98, they went 12-4. That's their best win total, was the 1998 season. I think they have a chance to hit that. I was going back and forth between 11 and 12. I ended up going on the conservative side, but I do think that they are at minimum an 11-win team. I think if they're finishing with 10 wins or less, I would be really, really surprised. Could it get up as high as 13? Maybe. I just can't, in good faith, make that as my prediction right now. I think anywhere between 11 and 12, is a fair prediction for this team. But I have them 11-6, 4-2 in the division, which is something that they haven't done in a really, really long time. I have them sweeping the Patriots for the first time since 2000. They have not won both their games against New England since the 2000 season. That is 23 years. That's a long time. And I have them splitting with the Dolphins and the Bills. So looking at the AFC East, is 11 wins enough to win the division? I still have Buffalo winning the division at 12-5. That might be an unpopular opinion for some, and I get it. And I do think they took a little bit of a step back this year. So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing if the Jets won the division. Obviously, that's what I'm hoping for. I want them to win the division. I want them to win every game they play, and I want them to win the Super Bowl. But my prediction, I'm going to go Buffalo 12-5. They finish as the 3 seed. The Jets 11-6 are the first wild card team, the 5 seed. I have the Dolphins 9-8 on the outside of the playoffs looking in. More on that in a second. And the Patriots at 6-11. The Jets and Bills are going to be really in this, going back and forth for the division crown. For Miami, I just don't trust that their quarterback is going to stay healthy. I think Tua, when on the field, is solid. He showed it last year that he's a good quarterback, but I don't know if he stays healthy. And their backup, Mike White, is also someone who has injury history and an injury concern. So I think that could be the thing that ends up derailing their season. They're a good football team. They're going to finish over 500. Maybe they even get up to 10 wins, but I have them at 9 and I'm just on the outside looking in. And the Patriots, their roster just isn't as good as the other teams in this division. They're not going to fully bottom out and be like a 2-win team or a 4-win team. They're good enough to win 6 or 7 games, I think, because of just how good that defense is. They have a really, really good defense. Matt Judon's a great pass rusher. I just don't think they have enough to be anything really more than a 6 or 7 win team. So my full AFC playoff predictions, I have the Chiefs as the 1 seed going 14-3, the Bengals as the 2 seed going 13-4. I have the Bills at 12-5 as the 3. The Jaguars as the last divisional winner at 11-6. Jets 11-6 as the 5. The Chargers 10-7 as the 6 seed, and the Ravens at 10-7 as the 7 seed. All right, so the Jets make the playoffs for the first time since the 2010 season. That would be thrilling. I would be absolutely thrilled. And in this scenario, their matchup is against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the wild card game. I do think the Jets would win on the road in that scenario. It stinks that they have yet another road playoff game, but unfortunately we've been used to that, as the Jets have not had a home playoff game since 2002. But the Jets go on the road and win there. They move to the divisional round, where they would play either, in this instance, the Kansas City Chiefs, or, I mean, I guess it could theoretically be the Bengals too, depending on how things finish, right? Like if one of the lower wild card teams finish. But with how I went through actually and picked every single game this year, there's a playoff predictor website which I used and went through, and how mine went was I had the Jets and the Bengals in the divisional round, and I do have the Bengals winning that game and actually going on to be the Super Bowl champion. I think Cincinnati is wins the Super Bowl this year. And I have the Jets bowing out in the divisional round, which would be obviously it would be a little bit disappointing that they didn't win the Super Bowl. They have, very, very high expectations. The AFC is an absolute gauntlet, but going from a team that was completely irrelevant to winning 11 or 12 games this year, to making the playoffs, to winning a playoff game is a really good first step. And obviously expectations are you want to win a Super Bowl during the Aaron Rodgers era. I think they're going to go to the divisional round this year. I think they have a chance, depending on their matchup, to go to the AFC Championship game. I really like Cincinnati a lot this year. I think they went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They went to the AFC Championship game last year. I love what Joe Burrow and that offense does. I think they're going to have really one last push before they lose some guys in free agency, and I think they get it done. And again, I'd be upset. I want the Jets to win the Super Bowl, but I'd be really happy with the season that finishes with them winning 11, 12 games, making the playoffs, winning a playoff game. And anything more than that, I think would be great. I want them to win every single game. I hope they go 17-0. I hope they win out and win the Super Bowl. But this is where my prediction is going to fall. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear where you think the Jets stack up. Did they win the division? Do they win the Super Bowl? Do they make the playoffs and lose right away? I want to hear everything. Go through. Give me your stat predictions for guys. Just any final predictions for this New York Jets team. I want to hear from you. Sound off in the comments. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.